Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel and welcome to episode 35 of Project LS400. For those of you who are new to the channel, I'll give a short introduction to Project LS400, and for those of you who are familiar with this project and my channel, I included chapters in the description so you can skip ahead if you want to. So what is Project LS400? Well, this is it. It's my 1994 Lexus LS400 that I got in the summer of 2021, and over the course of 2 years I've been repairing and restoring this car. It was in pretty bad shape, and actually it was in too bad of a shape to get it up and running again, but hey, I'm a kind of guy who's very persistent, and once I get started I want to finish a project. So what did I do to the car? Well, I tried to keep this short. It started off with the repair and maintenance that the engine needed. It needed some basic maintenance and some basic repairs, but when this car was sold brand new, it got an LPG installation fitted, so that's a liquefied petroleum gas installation fitted when this car was at its first owner in Belgium. This car was imported in 2014 to the Netherlands and the LPG installation was removed, but both the installation and removal were done in a very crude manner, so that meant a lot of repairs to the engine, and I wanted to get the engine back in original shape, and that was a lot of work. So if you want to know how to replace the spark plugs which are seized, that was the very first episode of this project. How to repair the wiring harness, how to repair the fuel injection system, you can go and watch the first episodes. In my workshop, I'm currently at a family's farmhouse because I cannot enter my workshop anymore with a car, so I have it for the winter time put in winter storage over here in the farmhouse. In the original workshop, the car was parked in a corner, so I could only work on the front of the car and on the left hand side of the car, and when I was halfway through I had to get the car out, turn it 180 degrees. So when I was almost done, finished on the left hand side of the car, I wanted to inspect some rust in the rear wheel arch. I discovered the car had real bad rust in the strut towers, and the rust was actually so bad that it would not make sense to continue with this project. But as I said, I'm very persistent, and I've done some major rust repairs to the cars. Both the strut tower on the rear left and rear right was very severely rusted, but I managed to fix that, and then I turned the car around so I could work on the rear and the right hand side of the car. My LS400 is fitted with air suspension. That's a factory option, a very expensive factory option, and after 30 years those air suspensions can become real troublesome. Problem is that the parts are pretty hard to get. They are out of stock everywhere, so it's pretty hard to come by, and they are very expensive. So I made episodes on how to inspect, repair and maintain your air suspension. I'll leave the link to an episode up here in the corner somewhere. So you want to learn more how to maintain and replace the air suspension, you can go watch that episode. And also I made episodes on, well, the known problems of these cars. The capacitors in the engine ECU, the instrument panel going black, the radio display, the LCD climate control display going black. All that stuff is, well, covered in separate episodes. So that in a nutshell is Project LS400. Now on to this episode. When I finally had the car up and running, it was driving perfectly fine. I never owned an LS400. This is not my first one that runs so fine and rides so smooth and refined. But after a week or 4 or so, all of a sudden the car developed a very serious problem that I have not completely been able to resolve. And that problem is a hesitation under acceleration. When you are on a bit harder acceleration, for instance when you want to merge in on the highway or you want to overtake, the car can stutter really bad. Now I've been investigated the problem, and I've been, well, partially able to solve that. That's one in the previous episodes, again link over there, where I found an issue with the power supply to the throttle position sensor and a coolant temperature sensor that had a short. Once I had that fixed, the problems were less severe. But there's one thing that I didn't give much thought, and that's the fact, as I said earlier in the introduction, that this car has been running on LPG. The car has been running on LPG since it was sold new. That was in '96, I believe. and that was on the car until 2014 when it was imported to the Netherlands. And all that time the car has not been running much on the normal petrol injection system. So I suspect there may be a problem there. When I was working on the engine and working on the fuel injection system, well 3 years ago now, I did have the injector pulled out and had them cleaned and had them tested, and they checked out fairly fine, and the guy that tested it said, well, there's very little use on this car. Has it been running on LPG? Well, it has. And so there are signs in the engine that this car, maybe had some issues due to not using the fuel injection system. And I've given this much thought, and then it occurred to me that maybe the fuel pressure regulator may be bad, because the symptoms do fit with having a bad fuel pressure regulator. So what did I do? I went hunting for parts. When I was on my parts hunt, I realized that the number one problem you have with these cars is that the parts supply is drying out. Over here in Europe, it's pretty hard to find parts. Car needs a new windscreen, impossible to find. Air suspension parts, impossible to find, or crazy expensive. And yeah, a simple thing like a fuel pressure regulator is pretty hard to find. The fuel pressure regulator on this car seems to be unique to this car, so it isn't used in any other Toyota product, and I couldn't find it. So what did I do? Well, I reached out to my friend Joe from Atlanta. Howdy Joe. And he helped me out. He was able to source a fuel pressure regulator and send it to me. And thank you so much for that, Joe. If I would have ordered that a single fuel pressure regulator, I would have paid a lot of import duties, import fees over here. But Joe and I went smart, and Joe was able to find one and send it to me. And here it is, and now it's about time to install this, and I really hope that this does solve the problem. Otherwise I have a lot of thinking and problem finding to do. But anyway, a thing like this fuel pressure regulator needs to be fitted anyway, because as said, the fuel system hasn't been in use all that long, and probably this is faulty. I'll show this in a minute. But before I do that, I need to address another problem, and for that I'll get the camera up and show you what the problem is. As you can see, the car is currently up on jack stands, and that's because of another problem. And that problem is, well, in a way not related to the fuel pressure regulator. In order to replace the fuel pressure regulator, you need to depressure the fuel system, and you do that by starting the engine and then pull the fuel injection fuse, fuel injection stops, the pressure disappears, engine stalls, and you're safe to work on the engine, on the fuel supply system. But I'd rather not do that. I'd rather drive the car, get it up to operating temperature, so I don't have condensation in the exhaust system, and also the engine oil is up nice to temperature and not much inclusion of blow-by gases and moisture in the engine oil. So I wanted to drive the car, but then I saw the car had been sitting there, and there are oil stains all over the place. And that's odd, because I had the transmission resealed when I worked on the car myself. But then I realized that I had a car sent off to the workshop earlier this year to flush the transmission. And what they did, they resealed the transmission pan, and they criticized me for using RDV, and they put in a gasket. But now it's leaking, and I don't like it, especially not because that flush was fairly expensive. And yeah, it wasn't leaking with my RDV. So the first thing that I want to do is see what is leaking down there. So I want to find that out, see if I can fix that, and then, well, get the car up to temperature, and then start working on the fuel pressure regulator. That one's not tight. That one's especially not tight. That one's not tight. That one's not tight. Good Lord, all bolts are loose, folks. And give her a whirl. So of course it starts. I'm going to open the barn doors and well, see you in a bit. Alrighty, car is nicely warmed up. Let's pull up over here. Also love the fact that the heated seats are working perfectly fine. So I leave the engine running, gonna open the hood, then I'm gonna pull the fuse and then the engine should die. Gas strut's still working. Let me get you up close. So the main fuse box is located behind the battery. And the EFI fuse is a 20 amp fuse, which is the third from the left. It should be that one. I'll use a needle nose pliers. And that's it. Sorry Lexus that I killed you in such a rough manner. Anyway, I'm going to put out the headlights. Okay, well, the fuel pressure regulator is this thing under here. And this hook is a bit in the way, I cannot get that out of the way, but I'm going to remove this vacuum line. Goes to the power steering pump, and this over here. Now this is what an older hose. These things tend to get real brittle after 30 years or so. I have to be careful with this one, so I'm going to remove this, and then I should be able to get an open wrench on here and on this fuel return line. That's the biggest problem with these older Lexuses. The quality of the rubber hoses and lines is very, very good, but even after 30 years, a Lexus gets the problem that these get very brittle, and if they start to crack or leak, you have all sorts of funky problems. Because what it does, it connects, if it leaks, it can either suck in power steering fluid coming from the power steering pump down there into the intake, and this is where the throttle valve is, and when it has that problem it can also leak air into that, so I have a bypass of air, and you get all kinds of fun problems with your car. Most likely you'll get a code for having a lean mixture. And if you have leaking power steering fluid into the intake, it makes a lot of smoke. So that's off. First I want to release this one over here, this little vacuum line that controls the entire thing. The controller is, I believe, this unit over here. That's a control, and a towel of sorts, because it will probably leak a little bit. Hope we can get those aluminium cross washers out. Put them over there. I have new ones over here. These are fine threads. You really have to be super careful when you tighten these. Need to get that one off too, because it's interlocked. Yep, there it is. Let me get a new one. Let's zoom out a little bit. So this is the new one, and compare sizes. Oh yeah, it doesn't have a hex nut on there, or does it? It looks a lot alike. Connections all are in order. Yeah, it does have the hex on there, sorry. And is this 17.2? Let's hope so, it is. Just have to learn with the fact that we have to work in very small increments over here. It's this part over here is the fuel rail, and I don't want to get any dirt or debris in there. So there's fuel coming out, but okay, let's put the new one in. Remove this little plastic protector cover. And there is a small O-ring underneath there. Camera wants to focus on this. As you can see, there's a small rubber O-ring on the bottom and an aluminium washer. leaves a nice amount of room for adjustment. So well, it's almost fully on. Let's just clock it in the right direction. That's this direction. That one can reach it. Okay. This is in a way sort of throwing parts at the problem, and it's always expensive to do. Bought this kit of aluminium seals, cross washers, when I worked on the fuel injection system 2 years ago. 12, that's the one to go. So that's in. Alrighty folks, I got everything back onto the car. I'm gonna start it and check for leaks and then hopefully go for a test drive. Okay, it was a bit of a difficult start. Car has a real low idle now. So let's close up the hood. Sorry, give myself a little bit extra light so you can see me. I'm going for a test drive and take my lamp with me, and then I'll check once again while driving. See you in the next scene. Alrighty folks, returning from my second test drive. Let's put the car in high. Well, that did not yield the expected results. However, it did improve. I can tell that the car behaves differently under acceleration. When I started it, I mentioned that the idle speed is much lower, so something has changed. Maybe the ECU has to adapt to this, but it behaves, so the stuttering is less, but now things are starting to point into the direction of the transmission. Just like in the previous episode where I tried to fix this problem, I replaced the coolant temperature sensor on the thermostat housing. That improved. Changing out the fuel pressure regulator now also worked. So from the original 100% that the problem originally had, I solved 70% by now. So things are starting to change. As I mentioned, I also want to check the wiring underneath the air filter housing. Reason being, every now and then the car, especially when it's warm, when I start up the car stalls. I have to restart it again. The malfunction indicator light is illuminated in the dashboard, and I start driving, and within a minute it disappears and the car starts to behave differently. But anyway, I'm gonna clean up. For now it's almost 6 o'clock, so it's about dinner time. I'm hungry, I'm cold. And well, I see you in the next scene. It will be a couple of days for me, but for you, it's the next scene. Okay folks, sorry for the sudden change in audio, but the battery of my wireless microphone just died, so I have to do with the camera microphone. Anyway, we're a couple of days later and I had some time to think. In the previous scene I said I was pretty unhappy with the fact that the transmission was leaking, even though I spent a couple of €100 on flushing the transmission, and them advising me to install a gasket. Well, they done that and I paid for that. I went back to the workshop and I told them about the fact that all the bolts were loose and the transmission was leaking, and his answer was, well, there should be a gasket in there, and they installed a car gasket. He didn't remember, and I just checked yesterday because the car is now back up on jack stands, as you can see. I checked and indeed it's a car gasket, and those things tend to shrink. So it's beyond me why there's even a car gasket available for this transmission. I'm not happy with that because, well, naturally they tend to shrink a little bit and you have to retighten it. I've also been thinking about the hesitation on the acceleration issue, And again, I think I need to look into the transmission. When the transmission was flushed, they test drove and said they didn't expect it to be the transmission, but I'm not so sure. So what I'm going to do now in the next scenes, I'm going to drain the transmission oil, I'm going to remove the sump, and I want to see if I can remove the solenoid pack from the transmission and look into there, see if there's a fault anywhere in there. Disclaimer, I'm not an expert in the matter, but I watched some videos on the #1 expert on that matter on YouTube, which is Calvin from Cartoon NZ. I'll leave a link to his YouTube channel and relevant episodes in the description box. For now, I'm gonna dive under the car, drain the transmission oil, and pull on the sump and have a look at the solenoid pack. I'm gonna take my smartphone with me to film a little bit under there because the camera won't fit underneath there. So anyway, let's get started. Status report, and that's the catch tray. Everything is draining. I leaked a little bit. There are the bolts. Now let's head over to the sump, which is on my temporary workbench. Here it is, and well, I got it away. Yes, it's a cork-like gasket, but now, come on, yeah, do it without a light and see the camera will focus, but you can see here and there and there the holes were misaligned during installation, so it was forced in place. This is the bolt hole that was stripped, so I need to insert a helicoil in there, but you can see it doesn't fit nicely, and on the lower side you can see, yeah, what was forced into place, so the fitment isn't great. All these little pieces of debris fell out, so yeah, you can draw your own conclusions. Alrighty, welcome back underneath the car. Try to make this work in this little bit of space that I can work in. Here you have the solenoids, #1, #2, those two do the shifting, and over there we have the lockup solenoid and the line pressure solenoid. This is #3, that's #4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. I will take them, I'll disconnect them, and then I'll put something underneath here because I made a bloody mess out of it. Shop at home, I have the solenoids on the desk over here. Power supply is ready, the multimeter is ready, and there's the workshop manual. The first thing I want to do is test the shift solenoids. I'm pretty sure that they are okay, but now they're out. I just want to test them. We're going to measure the resistance. That should be between 11 and 15 ohms, and then we're going to connect it to the power supply to see how it moves and if everything works okay. And then on the following pages is the test procedure for solenoid #3 and 4, which are the lockup solenoid and the line pressure solenoid. I'll set the camera up and we'll start with the shift solenoids. Okay, let's fire up the multimeter, set it to ohm, and it took me years to realize that you can take these covers off and you have longer test leads. Anyway, let's start off with shift solenoid 1. Put one probe on the body, another there. What do we have? 12.8 ohms. Well, it's not too bad. See if it makes a difference if I put a probe over there. It's 10, 12.5 ohms. So that's between 11 and 15. That's good. Now #2. It's running 13 ohms, still within spec. So those two are good. Okay, this is #3. This is the one closest to the engine. We should have a resistance between 3.6 and 4 ohms. So that's a bit on the lower side. Let me test it. 3.6, and that's well within spec. So that's okie dokie too. Now #4, which should be between, look it up, 5.1 and 5.5 ohms. So one I measure through there, the other one on there. Test runs. Well, 5.1, 5.0. So that's good too. So no electrical issues with the solenoids themselves. Okay, let's fire up the power supply, connect my test leads. No, I don't have the best test leads for this kind of job. This is more suitable for just have these little hooks on them. But anyway, let's start up at number 1 and connect one lead, the minus, to the body. Set this to 12 volt, and what we should see or hear is any noise from the solenoid. Dial it back to 12 volt exactly. Whoa! Bit of a downside with those test leads. Okay, here goes nothing. It draws almost 1 amp. So that's good. We hear it click. Happy with that. I'll repeat the same test with solenoid number 2. Almost draws 1 amp. Can you see it? Yeah, you can see it. So that's good. First, continue the test with solenoid number 3, the lockup solenoid. So here we have the lockup solenoid, and if you look inside the connector, not sure if the camera is capable of showing this. Let me put a little bit extra light on there. There are 2 connectors over there, number 2 and number 1. Number 2 is over here, number 1 is on that side. The negative terminal should be connected to the one on the left, and the plus terminal should be connected to the one on the right. So I'm going to do that. I prepared some test leads a while ago. I made them for testing the injectors, I believe. What we should see is we should start off by 0 volt and slowly increase the current, and then we should see the valve extend, and when we dial back the voltage it should retract again. So I'm very curious to see what this will do. I'm going to dial back the power supply to 0. Now I'm gonna apply some voltage and see if it moves. And it does. It moves with very low voltages. You can see it starts to move right now. Moves further, further. And this is the utmost precision. You see it move? Up and down, up and down. So that works perfectly fine. So I think we can call the lockup solenoid good too. On to the next. Okay, and then the line pressure solenoid. You look inside the connectors over here. The one on the left is the negative terminal, and the one on the right is the positive terminal. So I'm gonna connect this again. It's not smooth, the movement, however. There seems a bit of a jolt in there, and uses very low voltages to go back and forth. The fact that they all check out fine, well, it gives me confidence. So now we know that the solenoids are perfectly in order. I'm gonna give them a clean, a wipe off, and then we're gonna investigate this issue further. And for that I'm going to remove the hydraulic valve block. But I'm gonna close up for this evening and see you tomorrow. Well, I've given it a second thought, and I'm not going to remove the hydraulic valve body from underneath the car. 2 reasons for that. I realized that the workshop manual shows the transmission out of the car and turned upside down, and you do not have the risk of things falling out. With the car in this working position, I have this much space underneath the car to work. There is a risk that things fall out and they get dirty, they get damaged, or even worse, they get lost. There are tiny little springs in there and tiny little balls for the non-return valves. Let's not go there. Second reason is the transmission has been flushed twice now. Just before I bought the car, it was a couple of years ago, and just half a year, 6 months ago, transmission was also flushed, and when I look at it right now, things actually are squeaky clean. So there is no real reason to suspect that there is anything clogged up or dirty inside the valve body. So I decided not to go there. I can only damage things and introduce new problems. On a positive note, over here is the sump. I gave it a thorough clean, cleaned up all the old gasket material. What I did, I straightened down the holes and looked at it with a straight edge. All the bolt holes were bent inwards. I straightened them out, and I gave it a good clean. And what I like about it is the fact that the cheap paint I used to paint it, which was a €5 rattle can, actually holds up really well. On the outside, where the oil pan is exposed to the weather circumstances, the paint is holding up real well. You see some small little blisters under there. That's nice. And also on the inside, doesn't react with the hot transmission oil in there. It's, yeah, like factory new. Very happy with that. There is one magnet missing, but that was the case when I bought the car. So all 3 magnets are now clean, and there is place for a 4th one over there. So this is where the magnets sit. And yeah, I installed a new cross washer and I tightened the drain plug to torque. Anyway, what I'm now going to do is, there was one bolt hole stripped, so I'm gonna insert a helicoil in there. I'm not going to film it because there are plenty of videos on that subject. So that's what I'm going to do. Then reinstall the sump using RDV, of course. And then, yeah, it has to cure, so it's a simple task, an hour of work. So I'm not going to film it, and I'm gonna pick you up from the moment that I'm going to refill the sump. Okay folks, it's actually the following day, and I'm going to assume that the RDV has had plenty of time to cure. Now it's time to fill the transmission, and the downside of a system like this is we can only fill it via the dipstick tube, and if you do that using a funnel, you'll be working hours and hours to get a thick fluid in. It's fairly cold right now, so in order to speed up that process, I'm using this little transfer pump. I'll leave a link to this in the description box. If I forget to do that, please remind me in the comments. I'm going to set it up. Transfer pump works via the battery, so I'm gonna set up and we're gonna pour in plus a little bit extra because I messed up a little bit. I have that comes with quite a long tube. I've shortened it just for my own convenience, and it's a self-priming pump. So I'm gonna wait till the rest of it leaks into this corner, and for good measure, a liter extra. Okay, and that should be it. So anyway folks, that's it for this episode. Unfortunately, I've not been able to fully resolve the hesitation under acceleration problem, but we made a giant step. The new fuel pressure regulator really does make a difference, and I do hope that the gearbox will stop leaking now. And also we now know that the solenoids are working perfectly fine. I already have ideas for the upcoming episode. I saw that the steering rack is leaking. I knew it was leaking, but after a year of driving I can see where it's leaking, and I'm gonna think about what I'm going to do to that. And I also found out that one of the headlight washes isn't working. That's something I want to fix. That's not super important, but it is one of the things that I want to fix. Anyway, I do hope you liked following me along. If you did, please let me know by subscribing to my channel, give me a like, and if you have any questions or constructive feedback, let me know down below in the comment section. If you want to help support the channel, you can do so by buying me a coffee. For that, I'll leave the link in the description. As per usual, thanks for watching and see you on the next one. Bye.